When you get in your car, you might be tracked by a network of AI-powered surveillance cameras. These cameras upload your information to a central database, where government officials around the country can see a detailed record of your movements. I'm Kim Norberg of the Institute for Justice, joined by co-host Keith Neely. We're also joined by IJ attorney Michael Soyfer and communications project manager Dan King to discuss IJ's new plate privacy project and how everyday people are opposing this new threat to our constitutional rights. This is Beyond the Brief. So, Michael, when we talk about license plate readers, what do we mean?
So license plate readers are cameras. They're usually mounted on poles or at intersections, and they take pictures of every license plate that goes past. They convert that into text. Sometimes they also pick up other vehicle features like the make or the color of the car. They can even find bumper stickers or damage, toolboxes, things like that, and then store that information in a database where, officers can go in and look up license plate ABC 123 and see every place it was seen over whatever period they've retained data for.
How is that different from like red light cameras or, speeding ticket cameras or things like that?
So those cameras are usually looking only for very specific things. They're looking for people who are running red lights. They're looking for people who are speeding so that they can send you a ticket or summon you to court, whatever it is. License plate readers, the way they've kind of cropped up now is that they're just photographing every driver who passes. And the purpose of them is to store a record of who was where, when, so that police can go look that up later for investigations or whatever other reason they might have for looking it up.
When police want to look it up later, are they required to get a warrant, or is part of the problem here the fact that this information is just made available to police officers without having to go through that sort of third-party process?
So across the country, there's a whole patchwork of protections. Different departments have different policies. Different states have different laws. Generally speaking, no, they're not required to have a warrant, and the restrictions on how and when police can access this information are very, very loose nationwide. So in many places, police can just look it up on demand.
And it's not just the police issue that becomes a concern here. There was a reporter who drove through rural Virginia and then asked police for his location based on his license plate. And the only question police asked before turning that information over to him was, "You weren't trying to spy on a cheating partner or something, were you?" And then they just gave it right over to him. He said, "No, I'm not spying on someone," and they just handed this information over without really even confirming that this was indeed his license plate.
Wow. So they didn't even check to see who he was. He just said, "Hey, I want to find out the information about this individual," and gave his license plate number, and they were able to give him a detailed record of where he went.
He explained that this was part of this reporting that he was doing, but they didn't go through any sort of warrant requirement or anything that would have made sure that, yes, this is indeed this guy's license plate and he's not actually trying to spy on someone else. They just simply asked, "You're not trying to spy on someone, are you?"
Which, if you are trying to spy on someone, you wouldn't go, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what's happening."
Yes, spies famously admit that they're spying on people.
Sure.
I should say that's now illegal to do that under Virginia law. Under Virginia law, the police can no longer produce those pictures to anyone. But that just demonstrates the point that these systems have cropped up across the country much, much faster than legislatures can regulate them.
So let's talk about that. I think first we need to remind folks that this isn't just, one camera in a city. It's like dozens and dozens of cameras in a small kind of geographic area. But then they're also in a bunch of communities throughout the country, right? Can you kind of talk about how much this has expanded?
Yeah, they're in thousands of communities at this point. Cities, HOAs, towns. And it seems like every day we're learning about a new city considering a contract or considering expanding what they already have. And obviously there are instances where it's just a few cameras, maybe 4 on the corners of your community. But for example, our case in Norfolk, it's 176 cameras in a fairly small city, all things considered. So that really, really allows police to kind of paint a picture of everywhere someone travels.
What's the process of this look like? Does a city council reach out to a company? Do they have to, get approval from the city? What's sort of the justification that they put together for why they want to, install one of these systems in their community?
So oftentimes they don't go through the city council. Oftentimes it's just the police department using funds it has or grant money from the state, from the federal government, maybe a private foundation sometimes, to buy all of the cameras. In Norfolk, for instance, they used federal funds to buy I think the majority of the cameras, and they used state funds to buy some more cameras. None of that ever had to be approved by the city council. The city council basically found out after the cameras had already gone up.
And that's where a lot of concerns from folks on the ground that we've spoken with have come from. We worked with some activists in a village called Scarsdale, New York, a suburb of New York City. And the city was moving forward with flock cameras without really any input from the community, under the assumption that they were going to get a federal grant from Senator Schumer. And when that grant fell through, and a lot of the activists we were working with spoke out against using these funds for ALPRs, the city decided to not move forward with it, which was a great win for us. But if that grant money were to suddenly come back, there's nothing stopping the city from moving forward with an ALPR contract in the future.
Well, let me stop you right there because I have no idea what an ALPR is. What do you mean when you say ALPR?
That's just the acronym for Automated License Plate Reader,
Gotcha.
which is the type
Okay.
of camera we're speaking about here.
Gotcha.
The thing that's interesting about what you just explained is that sort of the money is the place where people get concerned here. But it seems to me like no matter who's paying for it, there's, deeper concerns obviously here. So can you talk, Michael, a little bit about kind of the constitutional concerns about what's going on? Absolutely.
So the Supreme Court has said we all have a reasonable expectation of privacy in the quote unquote whole of our movements. But surveillance doesn't have to capture literally 100% of your movements to reveal really profound insights about your life that just weren't available before. I mean, we've learned in the past few decades as we've kind of come into the digital age just how sensitive location data is, especially when there have been leaks of location data. And in many places, these camera networks are capturing virtually every move people make in their cars. In Norfolk, we've seen that these cameras can capture the vast majority of routes that people drive, and they can even enable reconstruction of routes, so you can kind of connect the dots and figure out where people go. If you aggregate that over every time people drive weeks and weeks on end, that reveals habits and routines that were basically private before because no one could see all of them. No one was kind of following you around for weeks at a time. If they did, that would be stalking.
Sure. So, Dan, we had this case in Norfolk and then sort of expanded that into this broader, not so much litigation even, but kind of activism and grassroots project called the Plate Privacy Project. So can you explain what that project is and what sort of the impetus was behind it?
Yeah, so after we launched the Norfolk case, we kind of started to look and see what kind of communities are these in, how prolific are these cameras? And I kind of undertook a mini research project to look, are these cameras located outside places where people would really want some privacy? And pretty quickly, we found the answer was yes on that. We found them outside of gun ranges, abortion clinics, churches, mosques, STD testing centers, a youth halfway house in Oakland. And we really started to think, this is a nationwide issue, first off, and it's a really, really pervasive one. So we started working with our activism team and reaching out to activists who were fighting against ALPR cameras on the ground. We've had some successes in that. We worked with our legislative team to work on a model bill that we can introduce in different states and cities to help fight back against this warrantless surveillance. And through our comms work on the Plate Privacy Project, we've had our work on this mentioned in 19 different states, as well as dozens of national publications. So IJ has kind of really become the leading institute in this fight against, for lack of a better word, in this fight against the warrantless use of ALPRs, to the point where reporters are proactively reaching out to us. Activists are proactively reaching out to us. Just this morning, I had a college student email me saying, I'm concerned about ALPRs on my college campus. What do you suggest? And sometimes we'll give these people talking points so they can go speak at a city council meeting. Or we'll get them in touch with our activism team and they can really put together a grassroots campaign to fight against this.
Does it make a difference to us whether these camera systems are being put in place by a, very public entity, the city council or the, police department or something, versus a private or pseudo-private entity like an HOA or a university or something like that? How do we kind of deal with the differences there?
So our focus on this has all been when governments are doing it. So we're researching to see governments entering into contracts with these companies or contracts coming up for a renewal vote, as well as places where we're seeing a lot of grassroots pushback from activists. And we're putting out statements in support of what the activists are doing. And that's getting folks like Michael into the media in those local markets so that these people know IJ is the leader on this issue and we know what we're talking about on this issue.
What's surprised you the most as you've kind of enmeshed yourself in this project? Because it wasn't all that long ago that we launched our case in Norfolk, and I feel like I know now so much more today about this practice than I did even just a year ago. So what have you seen that surprised you the most?
I would say the thing that surprised me the most, and this is a positive thing, is the amount of pushback this is starting to get on the ground. It is really bothering a lot of people, and people understand that this is different than, like we mentioned at the beginning, a red light camera or a speed camera that's triggered by this specific violation. This is just watching everybody with no warrant requirement and no reason to believe anybody has done anything wrong. And I think people are really, really wrapping their head around that and are really, really concerned with the proliferation of these cameras.
Where is the greatest kind of opposition to these camera systems coming from? Is it coming from, regular people in the community? Is it coming from, policymakers who, law enforcement sort of went around, as Michael was describing earlier? Who's the most mad, for lack of a better word?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. We've seen activists on the ground are particularly concerned with sharing with the federal government in how the feds are able to access data that these cameras collect. But we've also had lawmakers reach out to IJ and say, I like what you're doing on this. How can I make sure my constituents are being protected from this type of warrantless surveillance?
I think it's very tough for lawmakers sometimes to go against police.
Sure.
And if police say this is effective, there are often no questions asked and kind of a blind going with whatever the police want. So the more they hear from constituents, I think the more comfortable they get with it. But we've, heard from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. And that's one thing that's really surprised me is just how much bipartisan support there is to limit these systems and to regulate them in a way that prevents abuses.
Want to show your support for IJ? Check out our exclusive IJ gear, available only until November 12th. For a limited time, we're offering shirts, hoodies, tote bags, and mugs with eye-catching designs. Click the link in the description to grab one. Well, speaking of police, I'm sure, the devil's advocate in me wants to ask, law enforcement, I'm sure, say these help protect our communities. We're able to, monitor the situation as it develops. And sure, it might come off as a little bit too much surveillance at times, but if it helps save a life or if it helps, turn down crime in the community, maybe this is a worthwhile investment. First, do we have any evidence so far that these sort of cameras actually help to reduce crime? And second, even if so, does that matter from a constitutional standpoint? Does the Fourth Amendment care about whether a particular practice is efficient from a crime-fighting perspective or not?
So on your first point, some manufacturers kind of tout their own internal studies that show drops in crime, but those have really been questioned in terms of the rigor of those studies. There have been independent studies over the years, most of which are inconclusive or show no drop in crime. So, I think the evidence on their effectiveness is really kind of out. I think they've kind of become a fad among police officers, like, the Labubu of policing. It's just we see one department get them, and now like they're all kind of competing to have their own license plate readers and tell the community that they're safe. From my perspective, what they're mostly using them for is to get alerts for like stolen cars, missing people, that sort of thing. I don't see anything per se objectionable about that as long as they're deleting the data fairly promptly and they have rigorous policies in place for when, they can put someone in a hot list and get an alert when they drive past a camera. And they're also actually going to the effort of checking the car to make sure that the hot list alert is still valid and that the car is the one that there's an alert out for. On the constitutional side, the framers struck a balance where law enforcement can do all sorts of things. They can knock down doors, they can tear up walls, they can search wherever they want in people's, in the most private areas of people's homes. But they have to get a warrant.
Right.
And that puts a neutral judge in between a zealous law enforcement officer who just wants to stamp out crime and an individual and their privacy. And the framers of our Constitution were really, really preoccupied with general warrants in their time, which is a warrant that just said, hey, police officer, this crime is being committed. At your discretion, go search whichever places you want and whichever people you want. And the framers didn't trust the good judgment of law enforcement officers to just wield that power whenever they wanted. Of course, you can, hand a warrant to a law enforcement officer and say, go search any house you want, any car you want, any person you want, have at it. And you can, as a defense, say, well, law enforcement officers, we just have to trust them. But that's not what the framers did. And that's why they ratified the Fourth Amendment.
And I think Michael makes an important distinction here within the camera system, that we're not fighting the hot list that they have where if an Amber Alert comes through, of course police should be able to look for the license plate of the car that's suspected in that Amber Alert. It's the more regular searches of the system that raise concerns. And a lot of times these companies and police departments point to the fact that they do audits as proof that actually this is safe. But then when you look at the audit data, sometimes police are just typing ASDF, the first four letters on the keyboard, for the reason they're conducting a search. And at that point, what good is an audit if the audit doesn't actually tell you why police searched for a given license plate?
And that's not an isolated example. I mean, there are all sorts of, silly examples like that. In Norfolk, we saw one officer search dozens of times for la, 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 la. But the top reasons in virtually every department are usually really vague things like law enforcement, criminal justice, stuff where you could never figure out what that person was searching for or even if it was appropriate. There was a police chief actually in the Wichita, Kansas area who was caught stalking his ex-wife. And if you look at all of the search reasons he entered, they were things like drug investigation or missing child. Those are all facially legitimate. And someone sort of just scanning through these huge data files that can show tens of thousands of searches would never pick up on that being an inappropriate search. I mean, the audits, if a public company audited its books, like police departments typically audit these data, it would have a whole alphabet soup of federal and state agencies bearing down on it. These aren't genuine audits, and there are really no controls in place right now to protect innocent people from having their data accessed.
So just to kind of drill down into what kind of system we'd be okay with theoretically. Is it the gathering of the data that poses the constitutional problem, or is it more, it sounds like you're saying it's more the mechanism that you're using to search that
The
data,
aggregation.
right? And so is it okay with you that there would be cameras everywhere, that they're taking photos all the time, storing that data somewhere, and just as long as someone needed to ask a judge first before they went and did a search of that data, is that okay? Or where does that line lie?
No, the collection of data is the problem, because there's a problem having the government collect a bunch of data. And even if it's stored in a database where, theoretically the government is saying, oh, we won't look at this until we go get a judge to sign off. I don't think that really alleviates the constitutional concern with having this dragnet up over the entire country, building a comprehensive database of people's movements, whether they're suspected of crime or not. And so, we don't have a problem with the hot list alerts or with retaining data for like a short time period, for instance, 24 hours, because that's not really getting to the point where it's revealing people's habits and routines. It's when you store that same data for weeks and weeks on end that you really have that intrusion on people's privacy and security. The way one court put this is it's a difference between a day in the life and a way of life.
I have a bit of a tangent question to take us down. We've been talking a lot about cameras. I know in the media recently, there's been a couple of stories coming out about there are audio devices that cities set up specifically to listen for gunshot sounds. And now the company that's put those out are saying, well, we can also detect screams. And these might also be useful to help us identify situations where police might need to be dispatched. But it's prompted questions of, well, it's one thing to distinguish a gunshot from, the sound of a city. But when you start talking about screams and human noises, it sounds a lot more like we're listening in on conversations. Has IJ started to think about this issue? Is it different than the cameras, or is it just kind of part and parcel of this same broader problem of, 24/7 surveillance?
It's definitely part of a broader problem that's growing. I think license plate readers are really just the first wave of this. It's kind of an easy way to identify the same person, the same car again and again, and create a record of their movements. We've seen in some cities facial recognition cameras go up. I guess my understanding of the software there is it's much more crude, it's much harder to use, much more resource intensive. So you haven't seen those go up quite as widely yet, and that's part of why you've seen license plate readers become so popular, because it's a pretty easy way to track people. But I think this is really just the tip of the iceberg, and we're increasingly seeing cities under multiple forms of surveillance, where you'll have a system of license plate readers complemented by a system of video cameras, sometimes with facial recognition, usually not, complemented by a system of privately owned video cameras like Ring cameras, or cameras at businesses that just opt into a program and can have their video saved for stretches of time. And now, you have these gunshot detectors that are potentially picking up suspicious sounds and then sending police there. And it's this whole growing ecosystem of surveillance that's sort of coming down on cities.
And from a communications and PR standpoint, I think this is actually a really interesting point, because you get these companies sort of speaking out of both sides of their mouth on this issue. When they're talking to the public, they often downplay the new technologies and talk about how, oh, we're just taking photographs of license plates, they get uploaded to the server. This doesn't do video, this doesn't do, audio, there's no facial recognition. But then when they're making their sales pitches to cities and governments, they often play up these new technologies as, oh, if you partner with us, we'll be able to solve all crimes. This is actually one of the company's talking points, is that we'll be able to solve all crimes eventually. And if it's just license plate readers, that simply can't be the case. So it's just an interesting PR example of these companies kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth, depending on the audience they're speaking to.
So let's get back to the Norfolk case for a minute. Can you update us? I think that we did an episode quite a while ago now when that case first launched. Can you update us on what's going on in that case and what do we expect to happen next?
Sure. So we survived a motion to dismiss, and the court let our case go forward to discovery. In kind of the middle of discovery, the manufacturer of the license plate readers tried to intervene, and the court denied its motion, saying it was just too late, too untimely, and didn't have a right to intervene under federal law.
When you say intervene, sorry to jump in, what do you mean?
So intervene as a party, essentially like litigate the case as a co-defendant
Gotcha.
along with the city of Norfolk and the police chief. And then after that was denied, its lawyers turned around and said, oh, we represent the city now.
That's
Oh, wow.
convenient.
Yeah.
Yes. So didn't get much out of getting the motion to intervene denied. But nevertheless, we soldiered on through discovery, and we have now briefed summary judgment. We're just waiting for a decision from the court on that. And if the court doesn't grant summary judgment to one party or the other, then we'll have a trial in February.
And I think it's important to point out, too, the federal government has submitted a statement of interest in this case. So, again, oftentimes the companies or the cities like to downplay any partnership that they have with the federal government or say they don't partner with the federal government. But it really raises an interesting question. If the feds don't have access to the data being collected by these cameras, why are they submitting a statement of interest in this case?
And what did their statement of interest say?
It essentially just repeated the same arguments that the city of Norfolk made. I didn't find it very useful. It wasn't very nuanced. And it was oddly filed at like 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So, I'm not sure what the inside politics are there, but, that was my assessment of it.
So, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this thing where this private company's private lawyers are representing the city of Norfolk in this case. What are the implications of the Norfolk case for what happens throughout the rest of the country? Is this company involved? Is the federal government involved? Because this could potentially just undo this system from coast to coast. How would that even be possible starting from Norfolk?
Sure. So, there are, private financial interests at stake here. I think the company sees our case as a threat to its business because it's really the first civil case that's gotten past the motion to dismiss, that's been really vigorously litigated on our side. As far as, what the consequences would be beyond Norfolk, there might be a lot of practical consequences. Officially, a federal trial court judge's ruling is only binding on the parties. As we go up in the appellate process, at each stage, there are larger and larger implications.
So, Dan, you've been doing a lot of this, work in these communities, and you hear about other places like Britain or, a more extreme example of China where, people have sort of culturally accepted that just the government is going to be watching them. Are you encountering that attitude in general when you're going out and talking to people, or what's the kind of broad perspective that people have?
I think there's a small portion of people who do feel that way. You're driving, you have no expectation of privacy when you're on the road. But I think the vast majority of folks I've spoken with on the ground, both in Norfolk and around the country, are really, really concerned by this. Funny enough, when we launched the Norfolk case, one of the local TV stations asked their viewers, do you think Norfolk's camera system violates privacy rights? And I believe it was around 65 or 70% of the viewers said, yes, it does violate privacy rights. So on the ground in Norfolk, there is certainly a feeling that these cameras are creepy and bad. And we're running into that in cities like Sedona, Arizona, where we've worked with activists who recently were able to get their contract canceled. We've seen it in New York State. We've seen it in Oklahoma. We've seen it in Texas and Colorado. So it's not a red state or a blue state thing. It's not a city or rural thing. It's really just a thing that kind of resonates with a lot of people, that the government shouldn't be able to track your every move.
So what can people do, especially people listening to this podcast, what can they do if they're concerned about these cameras in their community?
Well, first off, I would recommend people check out the Plate Privacy Project, plateprivacy.com, as well as the DFLOC map is a great resource to show you if there are license plate readers in your community. That's dfloc.me. And if you do notice that there are license plate readers in your community, speak out to your city council and raise your concerns. If you know a contract extension is coming up, speak up against it if you're concerned about it. Or if you know your city is considering putting these up, raise your concerns. And also reach out to IJ if you want messaging guidance, or we've had a few activists on the ground reach out and say, a camera has been put directly in front of my house. We had a couple in Greers Ferry, Arkansas, reach out. They had retired there hoping for some solitude, some peace and quiet, and the city decided to put a license plate reader camera directly in front of their house. Every time a car drove by that license plate reader, it would take a photo, and that photo would include the entrance to their driveway as well as part of their front yard. And it got so bad that their kids stopped coming over with their kids, so they didn't get to see their grandkids anymore, because they were concerned that if they were playing in the front yard and a car drove by, their grandkids were going to be in a photo that would be uploaded to a server for an indefinite amount of time. We sent a letter to Greers Ferry saying, hey, this is not good. You need to move this camera to a place where it's not photographing every movement of this family. And thankfully, they did agree to move the camera, and it is no longer in front of the wolf's house. But we're hearing from more and more people around the country about these types of things happening in their community.
All right. Thanks so much, guys, for coming in and talking with us, and good luck with the case and the Plate Privacy Project.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks to all of you for watching or listening. If you'd like to get more of our videos, you can like and subscribe to our channel. And if you'd like to support this work, you can join us with just $5 a month at ij.org/monthly. Thank you.
Thanks again for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and tune in for more videos.